Given how exposed the rear derailleur is, they work really well, but you've got to look after them. If your rear mech is poorly adjusted, a little bit bent, or even just old and rattly, you're not going to get the shifting that you need. So here are the top 5 shifting problems that typically occur and how to avoid them happening to you. What is a derailleur? Well, a derailleur simply is a mechanical device for derailing the chain and putting it in a different gear. Over the years they've progressed and they're a little bit different, but they still operate on the same principle. The cage itself has 2 wheels, known as jockey wheels or sometimes guide wheels. The upper wheel is there purely just to keep the chain in line with the cassette and make sure the gears line up. The lower wheel is part of the sprung cage, and that is there to take up the slack in the chain that occurs when you're shifting from a larger gear to a smaller gear. It's a non-adjustable clutch system, works really well, and it has a lock on the cage just to get around that when you're removing the wheel. On the Shimano system, we've got a lever to turn the clutch on and off. Again, so you turn the clutch off so it makes it easier to manipulate the cage with less spring tension to remove the rear wheel. So your rear derailleur or mech will simply not shift accurately if it's not aligned on the bike. So the rear mech itself fixes to the mech hanger here. Okay, so if that is bent in any sort of way, you're not going to get everything lined up. So the first 2 ways to check that out, obviously visually, look at the hanger itself. Then you want to line your bike up in the highest gear, so that is the smallest sprocket at the back, and look for the cage just following the smallest sprocket down here. The next point to check is when you're in the lowest gear, so that's the biggest sprocket at the back. You want to check that the jockey cage, that's the guide wheel and the lower sprung wheel, are following completely in line with that. So if the mech itself is bent, as long as the guide wheel will follow the chain line, you can get good shifting. So on certain bike designs, the mech hanger has always been designed to brake before the rear derailleur or the rear mech. These are actually incredibly strong and very hard to bend, or even harder to bend back. So if this is bent and you do need to try and bend it back, be very careful. So if your mech hanger is bent and you need to sort of persuade it back into shape, the way to do that really is by using a proper alignment gauge like this. That's quite a specialist and expensive tool to use. And you simply just bend it and you can align it with the wheel using this adjustable gauge. The easiest thing to do actually is use a good old adjustable spanner. Adjustable for obvious reasons, you can clamp it around the mech hanger itself. But bearing in mind, if you do actually need to do this, you need to flip your gears so your derailleur is in the slackest position, so that's your highest gear, using a 5mm Allen key, or on some derailleurs now it's the T25 Torx, remove the actual derailleur from the bike. Your next adjustment is on the limit screws. So you get a high and a low limit. Simply, they just adjust the parameters of how far the derailleur can travel in either direction. So what we're going to do first is just make sure that the whole rear mech is aligned and limit is set on the highest gear. So that is this furthest one. So if you're too far towards me, it's just going to make a bit of noise like this. So it's not really in the right place, so it needs to go further inboard. If you're too far inboard, it's actually going to try and shift up a gear. So I'm just making the adjustment, turning it counterclockwise until it looks like the upper guide wheel is directly below. So now that the adjustment is made in the highest gear, so the smallest sprocket, I'm actually going to repeat the same thing but for the lowest gear, so the biggest sprocket. If you get it wrong on the biggest sprocket here and your chain hooks over the top, a few things can happen. First, you can damage your spokes on the wheel, which is never good. Secondly, the chain can get really badly wedged down the back there and can snap the chain in doing so. But the worst one is if it all gets bound up in there and it rips your rear mech clean off the bike. So the B tension is on the back here, and that screws straight on towards the mech hanger. And what this is for setting the height position of the guide wheel in relation to the biggest sprocket, so that's your lowest gear. So if there's too much tension, the gap's going to be really big. Your downshift is going to suffer at that. It's not going to shift very well, and it's actually going to stretch the mech out so much that it's barely going to have any spring in it. With the B tension fully wound out, I'm just going to show you the effect this has on the bike. On this particular bike, with it fully wound out, I'm finding that the top guide wheel is actually catching on the biggest sprocket as you change into that gear. Of course, that means your shifting isn't smooth, it isn't consistent, and it's not ideal. So now I'm going to show you the complete opposite. I'm going to wind it in too far so the mech is actually stretched out, and show you the effect that that has. The mech is almost locked, so that's a really bad position for it to be in. So there's two things that are going to happen. If you go over a massive bump, that chain is so stretched, there's a really good chance you're going to snap the chain, or at least the rear mech. And the other one is, listen to the noise this makes. You can tell this isn't right. Rear derailleur should be fairly silent in operation, not sound like that when it's absolutely stressed. Now I've got my B tension correctly adjusted, I'm just going to run it through the gears just to show you how well it shifts. Instead of just unnecessarily changing your cable, a good way to check that beforehand would be to undo the pinch bolt, and then you can manually feel the inner cable moving within the outer cable itself. You can do that at both the mech end and the shifter end. I can feel the cable moving really easily within it, so easy to flush out if I did need to change the inner cable or even just clean it. Another thing to check is your actual inner cable routing to the pinch bolt on the mech. It's very easy to, when you're threading the cable through, to not line it up with all the holes and the guide. The cable goes in at the top here, it goes around a little wheel and then follows this little guide through here, but there's actually a hole that the cable needs to pass through. Very easy to not do that, and if that happens then it's never going to line up, it's never going to pull the correct amount of cable that it needs to shift accurately. First things first with the cable tension itself is to actually clamp the inner cable at the rear derailleur. So a lot of people get this wrong by pulling this cable through really tight, but by doing that you're actually shifting the derailleur slightly. So what you want to do is just pull it taut. That's no more than that. The barrel adjuster at the shifter will compensate for any other slackness. Then we'll start working on the gears. What you're looking for is one click of the lever corresponding to one gear shifted. If you don't have enough cable tension, then the gears aren't quite going to hop up in time. And if you have too much, it's going to hop up too many gears. So it's very important just to do this a bit at a time and work your way up through the gears. This should shift perfectly now. It's fully aligned, my limits are done, my B tension's done, and the cable tension is perfect. So hopefully this video has helped you understand the sort of top 5 shifting problems that you're likely to get with a rear derailleur. If you want to find out a bit more about servicing Shimano gears, click up here. If you want to see how to fix a chain 3 ways, click down here. And of course, click on the globe to subscribe. There's a brand new video every single day. We make these as best as we can. And of course, if you like this video and found it useful, give us a thumbs up.